If you've ever had a moment in your life that split it cleanly into before and after, then you know the weight of what I'm about to tell you. For me, it was just a Friday night. Just another post-practice hangout in a drafty high school gym. The kind where the fluorescent lights buzz like they're trying to keep a secret, and the smell of sweat and old wood hangs in the air. We'd been running drills for 2 hours, the kind that make your lungs burn and your calves cramp, and now most of the guys had already grabbed their stuff and headed out into the cold. But not him. Ryan was still there, leaning against the far wall by the bleachers, twirling a basketball in one hand like it weighed nothing. He had that lazy, half-smirk that made it look like he was always in on a joke you didn't know yet. I'd known him since freshman year, but lately, in that strange, unspoken way, I'd been noticing him more. The way his laugh came out sharp and then softened. The way his hair always fell into his eyes no matter how many times he pushed it back. The way he moved, like the air bent to make room for him. The rest of the guys were gone. The heavy metal door clanged shut, leaving just the two of us in the echoing space. He tossed the ball my way, and without thinking, I caught it. "You're getting slower," he said, grinning. "Maybe you're just getting cocky." I shot back, dribbling a few times. Ryan's grin widened.
"Wanna bet?"
I thought it was just about basketball. I really did. We'd had dumb little competitions before. Who could sink more free throws, who could run suicides faster, who could chug a Gatorade without spilling it all over themselves. But this time, something in his voice had an edge to it. "What's the bet?" I asked, pretending to stretch. His eyes locked on mine, and for a second, the air felt heavier. "If I win, you kiss me." I swear my brain short-circuited. I laughed, but it came out shaky. "You're joking." "Am I?" he said, still smirking. But there was something serious under it. We just stared at each other for a beat. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it over the hum of the lights. I wanted to say no. I wanted to make a joke, roll my eyes, walk away. But instead, I found myself saying, "Fine." We set the terms, first to 5 points, no takebacks. I thought maybe he'd back out like it was all some elaborate dare. But he didn't. The game was fast, too fast. My legs were already sore from practice, my brain tripping over itself trying to process what was about to happen if I lost. Every time he scored, I felt the walls closing in. And when it was 4-3, his lead, I thought, I can't let him win. But I did. He drove past me, smooth and effortless, and laid the ball in like it was nothing. 5. Game over. We both stood there, breathing hard. He didn't gloat, didn't laugh, just dropped the ball, letting it bounce away, and walked toward me. I froze. He stopped when we were close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his eyes. "A bet's a bet," he said softly. And then, before I could think, before I could stop it, his hand came up, cupped the back of my neck, and he kissed me. It wasn't long. It wasn't some cinematic, fireworks in the sky kind of kiss. But it was real. His lips were warm and certain, like he'd been waiting for this, like he knew. I didn't move at first, too shocked, too afraid. And then I did. My hand brushed against his chest, and I felt his heart hammering just as fast as mine. When he pulled away, there was no smirk anymore. Just this quiet, searching look, like he was trying to see if I'd regret it. I didn't know what to say. The whole world felt tilted. "See you Monday," he said finally. Voice steady but softer than I'd ever heard it. And then he grabbed his bag and left. I stayed there for a long time, sitting on the cold gym floor, replaying it over and over in my head. The next few days were torture. Not because anything bad happened, in fact, nothing happened at all. We didn't text. We didn't talk about it. In the hallway, we'd pass each other and there'd be this flicker in his eyes, this almost smile, but nothing more. It was like we'd stepped onto the edge of something and neither of us knew if we should jump. By Wednesday, I couldn't take it anymore. I found him after practice, sitting on the hood of his car with his headphones in, tapping his foot to whatever he was listening to. "You avoiding me?" I asked. He pulled out one earbud and gave me a look. "You're the one who hasn't said a word." I didn't know what to say, I admitted. Was it that bad? The question hit me harder than I expected. "No," I said quickly. "It wasn't bad. It was I trailed off because how do you explain the way a single moment can rearrange your entire sense of yourself? He hopped off the hood and stood in front of me. Then what? I hesitated. I've just never, you know? He tilted his head. Kissed a guy. Yeah. Ryan studied me for a moment, then nodded. Okay, so now you have. It should have been that simple. Just a thing that happened once, a memory to file away and forget. But I couldn't forget. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt it again. The warmth of it. The way my chest tightened like I was both terrified and safe at the same time. That Friday, after practice, he walked past me in the locker room and brushed his fingers against mine. So quick no one else could see. But my whole body noticed. The bet had been a joke. But the kiss? That was something else entirely. And deep down, I think we both knew that once that line was crossed, there was no going back. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't possibly know, was how much crossing it would change everything. The thing about moments like that is they don't just live in the past. They seep into everything that comes after. After that Friday, it was like the air between Ryan and me had been rewired. Even when we weren't touching, I could feel him. When we'd run drills in practice, I'd catch him glancing over. When coach yelled at us to hustle, we'd end up running side by side, our strides matching without a word. And in the locker room, when the noise of the other guys' laughter and trash talk echoed off the tile walls, I'd feel this pulse of awareness whenever he was near. It wasn't like we were suddenly dating. There was no "so what are we now?" conversation. We didn't hold hands in the hallways or sit together at lunch. To anyone else, we were just teammates, friends. But I knew, and I was starting to think he did too. One afternoon, a week after the kiss, we both stayed late to help clean up the gym. The janitor had left the mop bucket in the corner, the smell of bleach faint in the air. I was stacking folding chairs when Ryan came up behind me, close enough that I could feel his breath on my neck. "You still thinking about it?" he asked, voice low. I didn't turn around. "About what?" he chuckled. "You know what." I set down the chair a little too hard, the clang echoing. "Yeah, I guess." "Guess?" he said, mock-offended. I finally turned to face him. "Fine. Yes. I think about it." For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he stepped closer, and there it was again. That steady, unflinching gaze that made me feel like I was standing on the edge of something huge. "You ever wonder," he said, "if we only did it because of the bet?" The question sank into me like a stone. "Do you?" His mouth twitched, almost a smile. "No," I swallowed. "Me neither." It was quiet after that. Not awkward. More like the kind of silence that feels like it's holding its breath. The second kiss didn't happen in the gym. It was raining, one of those relentless spring storms that turns the whole world gray. We were walking to our cars after practice, both soaked because neither of us had brought a jacket. My shirt clung to my skin, and I could see water dripping from his hair down his cheek. We reached his car first, and I was about to say goodbye when he caught my wrist. "Wait." I looked at him, shivering a little, but not from the cold. He stepped forward, the rain falling between us in sheets, and kissed me again. This time there was nothing tentative about it. No bet, no smirk, just his mouth on mine, warm despite the chill. His hands gripping my hoodie like he was afraid I'd disappear. And maybe I would have, if not for that. When we pulled apart, I could barely breathe. "You're gonna get sick," I said, because it was easier than saying I've been wanting that since the last time. He shrugged. "Worth it." I stood there watching him drive away, his taillights glowing faint in the rain, and I realized something terrifying. I didn't just like Ryan. I wanted him, and wanting him was dangerous. Because here's the thing, small towns don't make room for this kind of wanting. I'd grown up learning the rules. Keep your head down, fit in, don't give them a reason to look at you twice. And for the most part, I'd played along. I dated a girl once, for a few months, mostly because it was easier than explaining why I didn't want to. But now I was breaking my own rules. Ryan didn't seem scared. Or maybe he was, and just better at hiding it. He'd joke with the guys, push me during drills, keep up the same easy banter. But then, when no one was looking, he'd do something small. A hand on my back when we passed in the hallway. A quick touch on my knee when we sat next to each other on the bus. Little things that probably wouldn't even register to anyone else. They registered to me, and each time, I felt that mix of thrill and dread, like standing on train tracks and hearing a faint rumble in the distance, knowing it was getting closer. The third kiss happened almost by accident. We were at a party. Someone's parents were out of town. Music blaring from cheap speakers, the air thick with beer and too much cologne. I was standing in the kitchen, trying to decide if I wanted another drink, when Ryan brushed past me to grab a soda from the fridge. He leaned in, close enough that his shoulder pressed into mine, and said, "Let's get out of here." I followed him without a word. We ended up in his car, parked 2 blocks away, the streetlight outside flickering like it couldn't decide whether to stay on. He was quiet for a moment, fingers drumming on the steering wheel, then turned to me. "Do you ever think about what this is?" he asked. I met his eyes. All the time. He didn't respond, just leaned in and kissed me, soft at first, then deeper, his hand coming up to the side of my face. I felt the whole world narrow down to the warmth of his mouth, the sound of rain tapping against the windshield, the way my chest ached like I'd been holding my breath for weeks. When we pulled away, I didn't say anything. Neither did he. But I think we both knew this wasn't just a game anymore. Started with one bet, one kiss, but it was becoming something I didn't know how to stop. And maybe I didn't want to. The weeks after that felt like walking a tightrope. Exhilarating, terrifying, and impossible to get off without falling. We never talked about rules, but we had them anyway. No obvious touches when anyone else could see. No talking about it over text just in case.
No labels.
Especially no labels. And yet, the secrecy didn't make it feel less real. If anything, it made every moment sharper, like we were smuggling something precious past the whole world. Some afternoons, after practice, we'd linger in the locker room until everyone else had left. Ryan would pull on his hoodie slowly, like he was waiting for the last footsteps to fade. Then he'd glance over at me, that wordless question in his eyes, and I'd find myself nodding before I even knew what I was agreeing to. Once the door shut behind the last guy, the air would change. He'd cross the room in a few easy strides, grab me by the front of my shirt, and kiss me like it was the only thing he'd wanted to do all day. And maybe it was. I'd feel the cool tile against my back, his hands braced on either side of me, the faint scent of sweat and soap in the air. Sometimes it was slow, like we were learning the shape of something fragile. Other times it was quick, almost desperate, as if we were racing the clock before someone came back for a forgotten water bottle. It was dangerous. It was addictive. And I knew, in that deep, quiet place where truth lives, that I was already in too deep. Then came the night everything cracked open. It was late, later than either of us should have been out. We were parked by the old baseball field on the edge of town, the one where the grass grew too long and the bleachers were rusted. We'd been sitting there for almost an hour, talking about nothing. Classes, music, the way coaches' new drills made everyone hate life. Then Ryan got quiet. "You ever think about telling someone?" he asked, eyes fixed on the dark field. I froze. "Telling them what?" He shot me a look. "You know what?" I shook my head.
No.
"Not here. Not now." "Why not?" His tone wasn't sharp, but there was something under it. Frustration, maybe. "Because it's not safe," I said. "Because people talk. Because once it's out, you can't take it back." He was silent for a while. Then, softly, "I don't want to hide forever." That sentence sat between us, heavy and unmovable. I didn't know what to do with it. Finally, I said, "I'm not ready." Ryan turned away, resting his head against the seat. "Yeah, I figured." We didn't talk much after that. For a couple of days, things felt different. Not bad, just less. The easy touches, the lingering looks, the quiet moments in empty hallways. They were still there, but muted, like someone had turned the volume down. I told myself it was fine. We'd find our way back. And then, one Friday after practice, we did. It was raining again. Maybe that was our thing. We were the last ones out of the gym, the parking lot slick and shining under the streetlights. I was halfway to my car when I heard him call my name. When I turned, He was jogging toward me, hood pulled up, water dripping off his sleeves. He stopped just a foot away, breathing hard like he'd run more than 20 steps. "I don't care," he said. "About what? About who knows? About what they say." His eyes were locked on mine, and there was no smirk this time, no teasing. "I just care about this." Before I could respond, he kissed me. Right there in the open where anyone could have seen. For a second, my brain screamed at me to pull away. But I didn't. I kissed him back, the rain cold on my skin, his hands warm on my face, and for the first time, I didn't care who might be watching. When we broke apart, he smiled, small but real. "See? Still here." And just like that, something in me shifted. Maybe it wasn't safe. Maybe it never would be. But maybe it was worth the risk. The truth was, I didn't know where this was heading. I didn't know if we'd last past the season or the summer or even the next month. But I knew this. The bet had been the start of something I couldn't and didn't want to undo. One bet, one kiss, and everything had changed. Spring turned into summer, and with it came a strange kind of freedom. No more practices. No more crowded hallways where we had to pretend not to notice each other. Without the structure of school, it was just us. We'd meet at the lake some evenings, long after most people had gone home. The air would be warm and heavy with the smell of pine. The water still except for the ripples from our bare feet dangling off the dock. We didn't talk much about what we were doing. Maybe because putting it into words would make it too real, or maybe because neither of us knew how. Sometimes, Ryan would float on his back, eyes closed, the fading light painting his skin in gold. I'd watch him, memorizing the way the water curved around his shoulders, the way his chest rose and fell with each breath. It was in those moments, quiet, unremarkable, far from the world, that I realized how much I was falling for him. And that terrified me. One night in late July, we sat in his car on a back road. The windows rolled down, the sound of crickets filling the air. He was fiddling with the radio, switching between stations until he landed on some old song neither of us knew but both decided we liked. "Do you ever think about what happens when school starts again?" I asked. He kept his eyes on the road ahead, though we weren't moving. "Yeah, I think about it. And," he shrugged, "we figure it out." It sounded simple when he said it. Too simple, because I could already picture the noise and the rumors, the way people's faces would change if they knew. I hesitated. "I don't want to lose this." Ryan finally looked at me. "Then we don't." And maybe that should have been enough. But the truth was, I didn't trust the world not to take it from us, and I didn't trust myself to stop it. The first crack came in August. We were at a gas station, grabbing snacks before heading to the lake. A couple of guys from the team walked in. Guys we hadn't seen since the season ended. We said hey, made small talk, acted normal. But as we were leaving, one of them called out, "Hey, you two been spending a lot of time together, huh?" It was said with a laugh, but there was something in it. That edge. That knowing. Ryan didn't flinch. "Yeah," he said easily. "Why not?" But I felt my stomach drop. We didn't talk about it until later that night, sitting on the hood of his car under a sky full of stars. "They don't know anything," he said. "You're reading into it." "Maybe," I said, "but they could." "So what if they do?" I wanted to answer him. I wanted to say because it's not just about us. But instead I just shook my head and stared at the dark line of trees against the horizon. That was the thing about loving him. It was the best thing I'd ever felt and the scariest thing I'd ever done. By September, we'd fallen into this push and pull rhythm. Days where we were inseparable, where he'd kiss me without hesitation, where it felt like nothing could touch us. And days where I'd pull back, afraid of who might be watching, afraid of what might happen if they saw. It wasn't fair to him. I knew that. One night, after I'd made some excuse to leave early from hanging out, he texted me, "You're still scared, aren't you?" I stared at the screen for a long time before typing back. "Yeah." He didn't reply right away. When he did, it was just, "I'm not." I didn't know whether that made me feel better or worse. The turning point came on a Friday in late October. It was our first away game of the season, and the bus ride back was long and quiet. Most of the guys were asleep or scrolling through their phones. Ryan sat next to me, his shoulder pressed against mine, the warmth of him seeping through my jacket. Halfway home, he leaned in just enough so I could hear him over the engine. "I'm tired of pretending you're just my teammate." The words hit me like a jolt. "Ryan, I'm serious," he said. "If we're gonna do this, I want to do it, not hide from it." I looked around. No one seemed to be paying attention, but my heart was pounding anyway. "I'm not asking you to tell the whole world," he said. "I'm asking you to stop acting like I'm something you're ashamed of." The guilt hit hard because he was right. I'd been holding back, not because of how I felt about him, but because of what I was afraid other people would think. I didn't answer right away, but when the bus pulled into the school parking lot and everyone started grabbing their bags, I made a decision. As we stepped off into the cool night air, I reached for his hand. Just for a second. Just long enough for him to notice, for him to know. The look on his face, that slow, surprised smile, was worth every ounce of fear. One bet, one kiss, and now, maybe, a chance at something bigger than either of us had let ourselves imagine. November crept in with its short days and sharp air, the kind that bit at your lungs during morning runs and made the gym feel like a sanctuary. Practices got more intense, games more high stakes, and in the spaces between, in the stolen minutes when the rest of the world wasn't looking, Ryan and I got bolder. It wasn't that we were careless, but we stopped pretending our connection was something that could be neatly hidden. On bus rides, our knees would press together for entire stretches of highway. In the locker room, his towel would brush mine on purpose. In the chaos after a win, when everyone was cheering and shoving each other around, he'd pull me into the noise and let his hands stay on my back longer than necessary. I thought maybe this was what freedom felt like. Not an explosion, but a slow, steady push outward against the walls I'd built for myself. One Friday night after a home game, we stayed behind to help put away gear. The stands were empty now, just the sound of our footsteps on the hardwood and the distant echo of a door closing somewhere. Ryan picked up a stray basketball, spun it in his hands, then tossed it toward me. "Remember the bet?" he asked. I caught it, smiling despite myself. How could I forget? He walked toward me, hands in his pockets, that same infuriating half-smirk playing on his lips. "You know, you still owe me another one." I rolled my eyes. "Pretty sure I've paid that debt more than once." "Doesn't matter. I think the statute of limitations hasn't run out." He was close now, too close, and my pulse sped up in a way that had nothing to do with basketball. We stood there in the middle of the court, the scoreboard still glowing faintly above us. And then, without another word, he leaned in. The kiss was slow this time, unhurried, like he wanted to prove he could take his time with me and still get exactly what he wanted. My hands found his hoodie, gripping it just enough to keep him there. The gym felt impossibly quiet, like even the air had decided to hold its breath for us. When we finally pulled apart, he whispered, "Worth the bet." I didn't even try to play it cool. Yeah, worth everything. But for every high, there was still the shadow of the low. The first real crack came from outside, and it came fast. A few weeks later, someone, I still don't know who, made an offhand comment in the locker room. It was after practice, the usual chaos of guys changing and talking over each other. I was tying my shoes when I heard it. "Man, you and Ryan spend a lot of time together. You two dating or something?" It was said with a laugh, but the kind of laugh that waits for a reaction. I froze. Ryan didn't. He just smirked and said, "You wish," before shoving the guy's shoulder in a way that made everyone laugh and move on. But I felt the heat creeping up my neck, the tightening in my chest. I knew it wouldn't stop there. That night, we sat in his car, parked outside my house, the engine off. "They're gonna figure it out," I said quietly. He leaned back against the seat, watching me. And, I don't know what happens then." Ryan's voice was steady. "Then we deal with it. Together." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that the worst thing that could happen was just people knowing, that the world wouldn't twist it into something ugly. But I'd seen enough to know that wasn't always true. Still, when he reached over and took my hand, I didn't pull away. By December, The air outside was sharp enough to sting your cheeks, and the gym felt even warmer by comparison. We'd made it through most of the season without anyone outright confronting us, but the whispers were starting. A glance here, a smirk there, the occasional comment about best buds, said just a little too loud. And yet, I wasn't running from it anymore. One night, after an away game win, we were walking back to the bus in the freezing dark. Ryan was ahead of me, hands shoved in his jacket pockets, his breath visible in the air. I jogged the last few steps to catch up, and without thinking, I bumped his shoulder. He looked over, smiling. "What was that for?" "Nothing," I said. But it wasn't nothing. It was my way of saying I'm still here. Sometimes I think about that first bet, how small it seemed in the moment, how easy it would have been to say no. And then I think about everything it gave me. The stolen moments, the quiet bravery, the way Ryan's hand feels in mine on cold nights. One bet, one kiss, and a story we were still in the middle of writing. January came with its heavy gray skies and the kind of cold that made the breath between us look like smoke. The season was winding down, but the tension around us wasn't. The whispers had sharpened into something more pointed. A few guys had started watching us more closely, making jokes that carried weight under the surface. I caught one of them snapping a photo during practice, nothing incriminating, just the two of us talking by the bench, but it made my stomach twist anyway. I didn't tell Ryan right away. I didn't want to make it real. It was after an away game that I finally broke. The bus ride home was quiet, most of the team asleep. Ryan sat next to me, headphones in, but every so often his knee would press into mine. That steady, grounding touch. When the bus stopped at the school and everyone piled out into the icy air, I grabbed his sleeve before he could walk away. "They're watching us," I said. He didn't look surprised. "They've been watching." "Yeah, but it's different now. It's like they're waiting for proof." Ryan's breath came out in a cloud. "Then let them wait. We know what this is. That's all that matters." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. And it came. 2 weeks later, a photo showed up in a group chat I wasn't even in. It was us. Sitting in his car in the parking lot after practice, his hand on the back of my neck, my head tilted toward him. You couldn't see our faces clearly, but you didn't need to. The caption was just 3 words, called it "Boys." By the time I saw it, it had already made the rounds. That night, I didn't go to the gym. I didn't answer Ryan's texts. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling like the walls were closing in. He showed up at my house around 9. My mom let him in without asking questions. She liked Ryan, trusted him. I heard his footsteps on the stairs before he appeared in my doorway, wearing that same old hoodie, his hair damp from the snow. "You can't hide," he said. "I'm not hiding," I lied. He just looked at me. "Then come for a drive." I didn't want to, but I went anyway. We ended up at the lake. The water was frozen at the edges, the dock dusted with snow. We sat on the hood of his car, our breath mingling in the cold night air. "People are gonna talk," he said. "They already are. But we get to decide what they see. We get to decide if this is something they can use against us, or something they just have to live with." I stared at the dark water. "It's not that easy." "No," he agreed. "But it's worth it." And then he kissed me. Slow, deliberate, with no one else around to witness it but the wind and the frozen lake. When he pulled back, I realized something. Maybe the world would always be watching. But as long as we were still looking at each other the way we did right then, they couldn't take it from us. The season ended in early March. We didn't win the championship, but we'd made it further than anyone expected. After the last game, the team was all handshakes and back slaps and plans for the off-season. Ryan found me in the chaos, and for a second, I thought he was just going to say goodbye like everyone else. But instead, he grabbed my hand and squeezed, hard enough to make sure I knew. One bet, one kiss, and now a promise. Whatever came next, we'd face it together.